Two words to describe 28 years later, butt drenching. This is my spoiler-free review of 28 years later. Why do I call it butt drenching? Because I had so much anxiety watching this movie. It built up so much tension that I was sweating from the top of my head all the way profusely down my body and left my seat soaked, metaphorically, because this was unlike the two previous entries in 28 years later, much more sophisticated. Even when the trailer dropped earlier this year, I declared it trailer of the year because just the visuals, the sound, and the trailer alone, I knew I was in for something special. And I think because I have such an attachment to this franchise because how groundbreaking it was when it came out. Because if you look at history now, you think, oh, we've had zombie movies since 70s, 80s, talking about Romero and all of the greats who have handled the genre and really made it what it is. But when 28 Days Later came out and where it started, where you had this group of scientists working on chimps went crazy, killed some people, they throw up blood on other people, and that's how it spreads. And what made those movies different is the zombies weren't your typical walking around brain zombies. They were rage filled because that's what it was, the rage virus. And they would go around smashing people's faces, throwing up on them, and they'd infect another person. And they ran quickly. And that was something at the time we hadn't really seen before. Some would argue somebody else did it before. But that was groundbreaking to see a zombie not moving slowly, but to be able to chase you down to turn you into a zombie. And it's not even like your traditional zombie because they don't act the same way. They are quicker, faster, and smarter. And that was even back in 28 Days Later, which the first one takes place in 2006. 28 Weeks Later took place in 2007. And now with 28 years later, we are looking at 2035. The zombies have now mutated again, where you have these alphas that are even bigger and stronger and faster and smarter and are so sinister like. And what this movie focuses on is you have a group of people who have moved out to this small island where for the most part they are protected and they are connected to the mainland through this little strip of land that when the tide is low, they are able to walk from their island to the mainland to go and find, wood to burn fires, food, hunt, and also kill some of the rage-filled people who are living on that island as well. And that is how they get by, because they go bring their supplies, come back, and they are able to guard their community on this island by keeping that border secure. The dad is played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I think is a really good actor. He was great in Nosferatu. Was he the best in Kraven the Hunter? No, but that wasn't really his fault. I think he did what he was supposed to. That was just a bad movie all the way around. And he probably saw that as, hey, I'm finally getting a leading role in a movie here. I'm gonna take it. Much like Dakota Johnson probably did with Madam Web. Alfie Williams plays his son Spike, which I think it is really his movie. If you look at 28 years later, it is really a coming-of-age story because he plays a 12-year-old kid who he's at that age where he's still a little bit too young to go venture to this island to kill the infected, but his dad thinks he's ready. He's really pushing him. He wants him to be what essentially he is, be the hero of the town. And this kid is scared. This kid is not ready for it. And it starts with their journey into the mainland for his son to get his first kill. And it's really focusing on him developing as a human, where I haven't really seen that in a zombie movie. And I think the fact that it takes place in 2035, so long after the outbreak, is what makes this really impactful and what really sets itself apart. Because you start to think, like, how really would this change humanity? How would us as people adapt to this? You kind of revert back to the very early days of just building a society of, you have people in these roles, you have hunters, you have gatherers, you have fishermen, all these really essential roles. And something that was stated in the very first 28 Days Later movie was really impactful to me. And I rewatched both of the movies leading up to this to get me in that mindset. And I got really hyped going into this one. But there's a line in the first movie where they talk about, how are we going to build a world back after this? Like, how far away are we to getting things back to how they were? And somebody makes the point of, humans have only existed on this planet for a very, very small time. And I think I looked it up, and the world's billions and billions of years old, and the amount of times that humans have been here is like 0.05% of the lifespan of the Earth. And in that first movie, they say, well, really, If things were going back to normal, it would be us being gone from this planet for how little we have been here. And that stuck with me because in that movie, they're just trying to get back to the way things were before the outbreak, get electricity back, get humans just back living normal daily lives. And when you think about it, really having all those things taken away from us and the earth just being this place filled with nature and some other life form inhabiting it that can survive like that would be the earth reverting back to normal. And this movie is kind of going back to the very early stages of humanity where it almost feels like it takes place way back in the day, but really it's 2035. We would have to go back and literally start all the way over. And I think in doing that and how this movie starts to set this whole new stage, which it feels like a totally fresh chapter. And the thing about 28 years later is even if you didn't watch the first one, didn't watch the second one, which is also fantastic. It has Jeremy Renner in one of his best roles that kind of goes unnoticed sometimes. You have Rose Byrne in there as well. And that one's about an asymptomatic survivor and their kids who try to get saved by Rose Byrne and Jeremy Renner. But even if you hadn't seen part one or part two, you could just watch this one. And those other two now kind of serve as prequels because I think they're resetting this entire world, and the new franchise kind of starts here again because you have director Danny Boyle back, you have writer Alex Garland back, who did not write or direct the second one. But this is kind of the new starting point where they're going to make more movies. I hope they bring back a lot of these people because I really got invested in these characters. Ray Fiennes is just incredible to have an actor who is so next level to be in a movie like this. It made it one of the most beautiful horror movies I've ever seen because just watching it was a visual treat where you see this movie filmed on location, this beautiful countryside, and then these really vicious and heinous things happening. And there's this big juxtaposition of like, look how beautiful the scenery is, look how beautiful the beach and the water is, but then you have this alpha running at full speed wanting to eat your brains out, especially early on in the movie where when they're first walking to that mainland, it's almost like this witch enticing you with a spell to bring you in. And if you watch just the trailer alone, you might have heard this poem that's being spoken over it that's just so haunting and sinister. It's a poem called Boots.
People going lunatic. Boom, 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 moving up and down again. That's all the stars in the world.
Which was all about British infantrymen, where it's this really repetitive sound and you hear the boots marching, and then it gets a little bit more intense, a little bit more intense, a little bit louder now, a little bit louder now, and then it's just all out freaky as crap. That is how the first act of this movie just kind of entices you and brings you into it. And it makes you feel this terror that you don't really know where it's coming from because overall, this movie is less violent. I would say the thing that I didn't like about it, if there was one thing, is I wanted there to be more action. But that was only because I was basing it on the first two movies. If I'd only watched this movie and I hadn't watched the other two, I would think it's a perfect movie. But I think how it fits in the franchise, knowing that the first two are just more action filled. The first one is essentially a road trip movie where they go and try to find this military base after hearing a message with just a hope of finding somebody who has a cure. And then in the second one where the outbreak happens again, where they think they're safe and then they're on the run again. You're not really on the run in this movie. So it's not so much about trying to escape and run away from all of the infected. It's just how are you going to exist in this world now? So overall, the story just doesn't have that same level of action that I feel like the 28 franchise has kind of branded itself with. But it's evolved so much where it's taking on something maybe not entirely new, but it's not just one of the best horror films of the year. It is just one of the best films, and it's really starting to set itself apart. Now, would a horror movie like this ever be nominated for Best Picture? No, and that is a travesty because it is that good. Just because it's a part of a franchise, just because it's coming out in the summer, and because it's going to be successful, it doesn't really check all the boxes of, oh, this could be nominated for Best Picture. Ray Fiennes should be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He just should because he's that good of an actor and is that impactful in this movie that it takes it next level. This was one of the rare movies that I've seen this year that left me wanting more, where I knew it was starting to get to the final act. I knew it was about to end, and I thought, I just need to see more. It is a great reset. Also, just a great introduction if you hadn't seen any of these movies, which is a really rare thing in part three. Normally, it's so attached to what has come before it. But for it being what I would consider to be the first zombie coming of age movie, for it not only having great visuals, but also great sound design, I just want to pull the sound file from this movie and drive around in my car and listen to it like a podcast because I think just the sound is terrifying in itself. And I've listened to some horror podcasts, and I think you could pull the audio from this and also make a horror podcast like that. I also just love anything that's filmed on location. I'm a sucker for the countryside at dawn and dusk in a movie. I just think that is the best time of day to film a movie like this. So for 28 years later, I give it a 4.5 out of 5 rage viruses, and that is exactly what I would rate probably all the movies in this franchise. Part 1, Part 2, and now Part 3 are all 4.5s out of 5s.